Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time, a Wave Sports and Entertainment original presented by Prize Picks. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. Be sure to check out the Right Time YouTube channel. Lots of exclusive YouTube-only content, including our Concert Diary series. Be sure to check it out. But it is Howard Bryant Friday. Howard Bryant, Meadowlark Media, ESPN. What's going on, man?
What's up, Bo? Long time. When was the last time? Early in the summer, I think.
Yeah, you've been out here doing everything. For the folks who don't know, I just checked out the first episode of this on Netflix. Was the name of it? Comeback?
The Comeback, 2004 Boston Red Sox.
Yes.
And I feel old. It's been 20 years.
It has. I didn't really feel old until they showed the pictures of Pedro Martinez pitching, and then the pictures of Pedro Martinez sitting in that chair. And I was like, there's different weight classes. It happens. It's no shade to Pedro, but it was like, it's different. Then luckily he outgrew the Jerry curl.
And then there's that, right? I mean, there have been many iterations of Pedro. It's kind of funny because there is Jerry curl Pedro, and then there's that Pedro where he looks a lot like his brother, like Ramon Martinez, like, Expos Dodgers Pedro. And I was so happy that we got him. It's a real credit to everybody on the team who got this done. We signed that deal last summer, July, I believe, with Netflix in July 2023. And you've got the anniversary coming 2024. So Colin Barnacle, the director, Nick Barnacle, his brother, the executive producer, one of the executive producers. I mean, you had to have some sources to try to turn this thing around fast. So to be able, props to David Ortiz and to Pedro for sitting down and doing it. And to me, the whole thing was like, I don't know how many stories out there, Bo, that you can think of where you finally put an end to something that's been torturing you for a long. I mean, like Red Sox Yankees has just been hammer and nail. Like, we call it a rivalry because they hate each other, but it's been so one-sided.
They really just played a lot.
They just played a lot. They played a lot. They played a lot of close games. They played a lot of tight games, but at the end, we knew who was going to win. Like, my favorite piece of this whole thing all goes back to 2003. 2003, Game 7, ALCS. Red Sox, Yankees. I mean, I was really convinced. It's the Aaron Boone game. I was actually convinced the Red Sox were going to win that game. I was at that game. I was at all the games, which was also fun. And I remember pre-game, here's Willie Randolph hitting fungos right before Game 7. He comes over to me and he says, "Young man." I was like, "What's up, Willow?" He says, "What do you think tonight?" And I said, "I got to tell you, these guys are good. And they might be better than you." And Willie Randolph looked at me and he said, He says, "They're good. They might be better than us. But I've been around here a long time. And every time we've had to beat these guys, we've beaten these guys. And tonight's not going to be any different." And they go up 4-0 on Roger Clemens with Pedro on the mound. They're up 5-2 in the 8th inning. And then, of course, Aaron Boone does his thing in the 11th. And all I could think of was Willie Randolph. Every time we had to beat these guys, we beat these guys. And then, of course, a year later, it changes.
In the most epically dramatic fashion possible, right? Like,
exactly.
Going up 3-0 and then coming all the way back around on it. Like, something I found interesting is that you guys got Roger Clemens for this, and I kind of forget about him from time to time. Like,
he was great.
So the thing about him that is interesting to me is that I view him in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm from Houston. The legend of Roger Clemens never died there. In fact, it only got bigger as time went. There was no point at which Roger Clemens of Katy, Texas, where he isn't even really from, right? He adopted Texas. Texas adopted him. It all went there. And I was like, I had to look it up just a second ago. He left the Yankees after 2003. I don't think he's showing up for this to give any satisfaction to a Boston Red Sox victory. No, he is not. He is showing up to talk about that time when we still beat y'all. And then after I left, hey, I don't know what happened.
And you know what? And Roger was tremendous in that because he looked good. And he looked, when I saw Roger on camera, the first thing that I thought of was having just watched the Pete Rose doc on HBO. And I was like, Roger is actually, he looked like he's in a really good place. And he's proud of his career. He's proud of what he did. And he still got that imposing Roger Clemens thing, right? People forget because the world is bigger now. But in 1984, 6'4", 250 on the mound, that's a big dude. And he carried himself that way. Now, obviously, guys are bigger today. So, Otani's 6'4" and he's facing you. Ortiz is 6. Those guys are big guys too. Jeter and A-Rod are big guys. But for most of his career, when Roger Clemens was on the mound, you weren't going to charge him. You were hoping he wasn't going to hurt you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I look at a 6'4", 250-pound white dude from Texas being a baseball player.
Pitcher.
Like I look at a 6 feet. Is that the same way I look at as like a 6'10" dude doing anything other than playing basketball? Like, oh, okay, you must not have been any good at that. I look at that. You 6'4", 250, and you from Katy. Wow, you must not have been any good at football, huh?
But real good at baseball.
Yeah, they just gave up on the whole idea. Oh, okay. Like, if that's what it is. But no, I as I was watching through the first episode and I was thinking about how big a thing Yankees Red Sox was in the sports zeitgeist in 2003. And it really just got me thinking generally. The Pete Rose dying also did the same thing. The declining significance of baseball in the mainstream zeitgeist is wild with nothing to point to say why that is the case. But Yankees Red Sox would shut the world down. I think part of it was a greater emphasis from ESPN, where the center of sports media was 2 hours from each place, and you have an office full of people that root for both teams, right? It takes on its own light. That speaks in part to the rise of UConn basketball, both men's and women's, all kinds of things, the location of ESPN. But even still, baseball stars used to be much, much, much bigger deals. And the baseball rivalries used to be much bigger deals, where we got Yankees and Dodgers, right? Starting Thursday night. People hear this on Friday. We're talking on Thursday. And it just doesn't command the same level of our attention that it used to.
Yeah. And why is that? That is because baseball did two things, in my humble opinion. Number one, baseball decided it was a regional game. Now, I got you by a dozen years, but you're still old enough to remember when there were guys who were national baseball stars. Reggie Jackson was a national guy. Pete Rose was a national guy. Ken Griffey Jr. was a national guy. And then after the 94 strike, it was like, no, we're going to concentrate on our regions. And the other reason is because baseball players have to try really hard not to be assholes. I mean, it's like pulling teeth with some of these guys. Because baseball's an everyday thing. So you're not supposed to get too high or too low, and you're not supposed to do things that the television age demands of you, which is be a star. Because now you're drawing attention to yourself, and now somebody hits you in the back with a fastball, right? So the nature of the game prevents you from doing all that camera mugging and stuff that you see in football and that you see in basketball and you see in the other sports. Baseball, you do that, somebody's going to throw a ball at your head. And so that's why you see all this sort of corny, bat flipping and making a big deal about bat flipping and dudes showing emotion and everybody getting all upset about it because it just runs counter to the history of the sport. But I'll tell you one other thing too about Red Sox Yankees. We coming through that period. And like I said, I covered both teams at that time. And I got it now. I get it when the old timers would say, oh, well, if you ain't seen Jim Brown, you don't know football. If you didn't see Willie Mays, you don't know baseball. If you didn't see Wilt, you don't know basketball, right? I understand all of that now because that was the greatest baseball I've ever seen in my life. These two teams played each other something like 52 times in over a 2-year period. And they played each other in the World Series. I mean, they played each other, for the right to go to the World Series, like all the things you needed for a rivalry. Like and it was real. I mean, that was the other thing. It was real. I remember sitting in Yankee Stadium in the old place, And the old place is not like the new place. The old place was literally moving. Like that building is shaking. When Aaron Boone hit that home run, I'm sitting in the press box. I'm watching Aaron Boone round the bases. Okay? Now, while he's rounding the bases, Mariano Rivera, and you can look this up, look at the film. He runs out to the mound and lays on the mound and is embracing the mound because he pitched 3 scoreless innings. He is having a religious experience on the mound. It's the only time you can see. It's like if you look at the photo, you see a Yankee running the bases with a Yankee on the mound. And while I'm sitting there, I look over to my left and there's Gene Afterman, the Yankee assistant GM, with Brian Cashman, the GM, and Reggie Jackson. And they're in this trio just hugging, jumping up and down while the whole place is shaking. And here's Randy Levine, the president of the Yankees. And he walks down, he passes them. I guess he don't have time to celebrate. He walks right down to the edge of the press box, shakes his fist at the field and says, "Take that, you 1918 pieces of shit." This is a true story. I mean, this was real. I mean, for real.
What a strange way to put it.
Because the whole crowd, they're all chanting 1918, right? It's just insane. That whole night was one of the most insane nights of my life. And Theo Epstein, you walk into that Red Sox clubhouse, Theo Epstein, his face looked sunburned. He had been crying so hard. It was like a funeral in there. This is a true story. Theo is sitting there, Bo, and we walk, and no one knows what to say to him. What do you say after all of that, right? And he's looking, and he goes, "They got us. We're going to win it next year." And he walked away, and a bunch of the reporters were all looking at each other and started laughing.
Wow. I had a thought in watching the episode about the 03 series. By the way, shout out to you, Grady Little. I'd have turned down these phone calls.
I'm so happy Grady did it.
I guess also didn't fully realize nobody's voice sounds more like his name than Grady Little. Grady Little sound like a dude named Grady, right? And look, I guess it stands to reason I hadn't met a hashtag White Grady before, right? But if there was going to be a White Grady, that was how a White Grady was going to sound.
And you know what? There's no way around it. Somebody said to me once, "How come Pedro Martinez didn't take enough weight for that? He's a superstar." And I was like, this is the moment that they pay. This is what they pay everybody for. You know what I mean? They pay you, Pedro, to get through this. They pay you, Grady, to make the right decision. And God help any of us to be in that position and make the wrong call.
Yeah. Well, why doesn't Pedro take more weight for this? Well, number one, almost ironically, because greatness gets you a burden. But on the other hand, Bill Simmons used to compare him to Mozart, which I thought was an absolutely appropriate comparison to that era of Pedro Martinez. But we also we also knew what Pedro Martinez was. Okay, this wasn't a horse that was going to get throw like 150 pitches. This is what Jack Morris,
That's
right? He's not good. I mean, he's a much better pitcher than Jack Morris. But if you tell me somebody needs to go throw 10 innings, Jack Morris and that mustache are going to be out there throwing 10 innings, and Pedro Martinez is probably going to give you 7 2/3. But I also think is this part, and I was thinking about this in the context of modern baseball, where they got to figure out something to do about the idea that somebody could come in and say, we're having a bullpen game today, which is, like, to me, the most maddening concept in the world.
In the World Series.
Right. Pedro Martinez said, I'm going to give it everything that I got. If you ask me if I got it, I'm going to tell you that I got it because I think that I can dig down deep and get it. And what we always want is the guy to try to dig down deep. And we all knew he didn't have it anymore. But we also understood why he would try. It is Grady Little's job to thereby save him from himself. But Grady Little, also from an era of baseball that you and I relate to a little bit more, 100% understands the idea of, I'm going to let my dude go out there and get it done. I think he's got it, right? I personally believe in life. Most people, a lesson I learned from playing sports is you're stronger than you think you are, right? And he looked at that dude and was like, he thinks he's got it. I'm going to let him have it. Terrible decision, by the way. Also somewhat noble.
And you know, exactly. And you know what else, though? But that is the thing about legacy. And that is the thing that, athletes, it's one of my biggest pet peeves that athletes just mangle this word. We mangle this word. You go out and you score 25 points. And people say, I'm just trying to add to my legacy. That's not your legacy. Those are your accomplishments. The legacy is what you leave behind. And what was left behind from that day was the rise of analytics. John Henry is sitting there in the stands watching it all fall apart. You get a 5-2 lead in the 8th inning. You're essentially, I believe, you're 4 outs from going to the World Series. And he leaves Pedro in when all of the numbers told you got to get him out of there after 95 pitches. That his ERA, the whole thing falls apart once that you hit that point. And Grady ignored that. He ignored the data. And what does that lead to? The rise of analytics. The whole trust your gut manager. All of it died that night. Billy Martin died that night. Tommy Lasorda died that night. Casey Steng, all of it, the whole manager as face of front office died that night because of that decision.
But ironically, the game ends with a super duper trust your gut decision. As you said, Mariano Rivera pitches 3 innings.
That's right. Well, because that's the other piece of that is that, and here's the thing, Joe Torre was, we used to call Joe the Godfather when he was the manager of the Yankees. Joe was all about trust. Joe didn't trust you, you weren't playing. What was one of the reasons why they lost in 2004? It wasn't just because the Red Sox came back. Yankees were done. They had no more pitching. Joe ran Quantrill and Tom Gordon out there every single night because if Joe trusted you, Joe was going to put the whole season in your hands. Joe was all about trust. And Grady was like, I'm trusting you. But what you're also saying is that I don't trust those guys behind me. And so Mike Timlin and Alan Embree and all those guys, they were ready to go. And they were like, to them, to this day, when they think about 2003, it was like, why didn't you trust me? I was going to get us to the World Series. And that's all about, that's sports. That is the ultimate, and everybody's watching it. And what was hilarious to me, and it's also the end, it was the end of Red Sox Yankees, obviously 2004 when they get killed game 3, 19-8. That's the official end of it because the Yankees have not beaten the Red Sox in the playoffs since. Like the rivalry ended in that day, right? But right there that night, we're sitting there and I'm walking up. It's 2:00 in the morning. And all the Yankee fans have circled the Red Sox bus. And they're chanting 1918, and they're trying to shake the bus, and they're trying to get, Yankee security is trying to clear a path so the Red Sox bus can get out of town. And I'm standing there right in front of the entrance of the old stadium. And here comes George. It's 2:00 in the morning, and there's George Steinbrenner wearing like a U.S., Olympic team windbreaker and sunglasses. And I'm thinking that here's George Steinbrenner, owner of the Yankees, that he's going to walk over and he's going to be a statesman because he's an owner and he's going to suggest that the fans get out of the way so the Red Sox can leave. And instead, George walks right past me, walks up to the Red Sox bus and starts waving. We win again! We win again!
There is nothing better in sports than people who care.
And right then and there, it was like, this is everything, right? I mean, and people just don't understand because we don't have that level of rivalry anymore. You look at what baseball has done since. You go to interleague every day. Does anybody care about the Rockies playing the Tigers? I mean, this is what it's all about, And when you start taking those things away, you begin to completely dilute what this means. And that was the top of the top. For me, it's the greatest baseball I've ever seen. And I think about the greatest, that greatest period, that small window where two teams just knocked the hell out of each other. Maybe Cowboys, 49ers, early 90s. There are comps. The Avalanche and the Red Wings when they were just trying to kill each other on the ice.
Yeah, that was the one. That's the look. I don't know enough about hockey to make a documentary, but I'd love to direct that one. Right? Because it was so, part of what made that so weird is that one of the teams was called the Avalanche. Right. Like it was kind of the future of sports in a lot of ways. Like their logo, like there was such a juxtaposition between new and old. I mean, them used to be the Nordiques and they stunk.
Quebec, exactly. Mm-hmm.
They stunk. And then next thing you know, this is a thing. Yeah. A great big old giant. Oh, and they are doing violent things to each other out here.
No, that's right. And obviously Celtics Lakers, you had that. Celtics Sixers, you've had them before. I'm not saying that this was the last big one that I can really remember. And part of the reason is that I think that people have decided, or the people who run these games have forgotten how much that matters to everybody. Like sports is the illusion that it's important. And then it actually becomes important, right? I mean, when we walked in that clubhouse, I remember in 04, I talked to Ortiz about this in 2017, and he was like, man, I can't believe we came back from 3-1. We had no chance. I said, dude, you came back from 3-0. He was like, nah. I'm like, yeah, it was 3-0. And it's like, you have to have these things. And if you don't have that thing where you circle that game a year in advance, you lose everything. You lose the whole power of it.
How much of this also do you think is, as digital and everything else has made our world a bit smaller, have city rivalries changed in that regard, right? Because a significant part of this is not just Yankees and Red Sox, it is Boston and New York City. When you start talking about Celtics Sixers, for example, Celtics Knicks Sixers, all of those things, those are also city rivalries that get into it. Chicago St. Louis, even though it's kind of adorable that, well, I guess maybe there was a time where St. Louis and Chicago were
and we saw a little tiny
bit
of it, believe it or not. I'm going to throw this out there, and you can crush me for it, but we started to see a little bit of that. I really don't like you with the Padres and the Dodgers.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like you. I don't like you either, right? I mean, so, and you do need that regional.
Atlanta, New Orleans in football, by the way, post Katrina became very much a city rivalry.
Yep. I mean, and you got to play for something. That's the other thing too. You got to play for something. I mean, I looked at the schedule this year, and I think the Bruins and the Canadiens are only playing each other 3 times this year. Remember back when you arrived, you played each other 6 times. You need to do that every single year, 6 times where you go at each other. And when you start just taking that away, then you're not in each other's orbit anymore. Right. And you need to be in orbit in order to have that. And you got to have stakes.
Right. Now that's it. Yankees and Red Sox do play 19 times a year. I feel like this Yankees team, and this is just someone who doesn't pay as much attention to baseball as he used to, as they get a little bit closer to being the Avengers again, it starts feeling a little more familiar to somebody like this. Like, oh, you got Judge and Soto.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right? This is what the personality of this is supposed to be. Now that they got an owner that don't care that much, it's not nearly as fun.
Well, it's because you need George.
Yep.
I mean, that's the thing. It's, hey, that team has not been the same since the old man died. Because nobody cared the way the old man cared. And do you really want to be in the baseball business? That's one of the big questions with the Steinbrenners in the first place. Does anybody here really want to be in the baseball business? Or are you just holding on to the team because you're a Steinbrenner and Steinbrenners are supposed to own the Yankees? Right? I mean, George was all in on this. Insane and all in on this. And representing, I remember when they beat the A's in 2001, when they came back from 2-0 in the division series and everybody was losing their mind. And here's George downstairs. And it was unreal. It was like a Seinfeld episode. And he's got the sunglasses on and he's surrounded by everybody. And that's the thing about New York and what New York does. And that we'll fight you tooth and nail. We'll fight you every second. If there's one taxi coming and there are 3 people, those 3 people, they're not going to negotiate. One of those 3 is going to beat the other 2. And that's New York. And those are my Yankees. And I was like, this is unbelievable, right? I mean, you don't get that now. That's not there. And the business of it has made the Yankees. This Yankee team is really interesting because I don't know if they're that good. I don't know if they're that interesting, but they're in the World Series. And that's also what I mean about needing to have that sort of personality. Aaron Judge is a superstar. When was the last time you had 2 of them go at each other? 2 MVPs play each other in the World Series. This is the first year Ohtani's even been in the playoffs. You got Mookie Betts, Ohtani, Judge, and Soto in the World Series. New York, LA. You've got everything you're asking for. And yet they're still kind of dull right now.
I will get back to more on this. We're going to pay some bills right fast. We're coming back on the right time. The NFL is back in full swing, which means you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite teams only on Prize Picks. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. But rather than hearing it from me, let's hear from somebody who uses Prize Picks. Sean, how the picks been coming?
Bo, the picks have been picking. You can obviously hear my picks at the end of each episode, but with Prize Picks, you can also play along with celebrities like Drewski, Joe Budden, and MMA champ Sean O'Malley. And you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries of some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. And look, if you'd rather just hear from the picks that I do at the end of the show, that's fine too.
There we go. So make sure you go to prizepicks.com/Bomani and use code Bomani for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/Bomani. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sean, although October is the season for wearing masks and costumes, some of us feel like we wear a mask at work, social settings, and even around our family. Have you ever felt like you couldn't be your full self, like you were hiding behind a mask?
For me, Bo, I try to be myself in all settings and with everyone I encounter. But look, I know it's certainly easy to get caught up in portraying yourself in a specific way or putting on a mask, whether it's to impress someone at work or make a good first impression. But I feel like it's always best to show the real you.
That's right. And therapy can help you to accept all parts of yourself so that you can take off the mask. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/Bomani today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Bomani. Peloton is more challenging than people think. If you've been watching the show, I put on some muscle, and it's literally all thanks to Peloton. Peloton got your boy in the gym, and it's been one of the best things I've added to my weekly schedule. There's so many challenging programs to choose from, and Peloton even helps the top athletes get ready. Their custom strength workouts for the gym keep you on track to push your limits every time. Peloton is also a place to keep the spirit of competition alive. You can track the leaderboards to see who can get the largest output. Peloton classes and instructors like Alex Toussaint are designed to help focus on your needs and goals. Whether you prefer to run outdoors, row, or ride at home, or strength train at the gym, Peloton has something for you. I genuinely use Peloton, and I'm actually getting the results I want thanks to their great programs. So if you want to join Peloton, head over to onepeloton.com and get started on your fitness journey. Find your push, find your power with Peloton at onepeloton.com. All right, we're talking to Howard Bryant, and yes, there's that thing that's not there. It's I don't have like the ready-made explanation for what the thing is. But as much as I know who Shohei Ohtani is, I know who Aaron Judge is, I know who Soto is, I don't have a gauge on who any of them are.
That's right.
I got more of a gauge on Ohtani, but even then, that's obviously incredibly manicured.
Well, and using an interpreter doesn't help, right? I mean, you do have to be able to speak to your public. And when you play in Major League Baseball, your public is American. And so his star power reduces. Remember in the 1990s when you had the Latino superstars, Sammy Sosa and those guys, and when they would do commercials, like I think it was a Pepsi commercial, they would just have him sit there and smile, right? You're not talking. And so you need that, so you really do need to connect in a way to become a super. Does Aaron Judge want to be the national guy? Who was the guy? I talk to people in baseball about this all the time. And I ask them, who's the one guy in this game who actually wants to be LeBron? Like who wants to be the superstar? And only one name really comes up. It's Bryce Harper.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's like, really, who's the guy who wants to be the guy?
Harper fascinates me because this has gone a lot better than I think any of us thought it would in terms of how we ultimately feel about Bryce Harper. I can't think of anybody, like I think Cooper Flagg is going to feel this to a degree when he comes to the NBA, where you got a whole bunch of people waiting to not like you.
That's right.
Right? Like I think with everything that happened with Harper and the Sports Illustrated stuff and everything else, everybody was waiting to not like him. And then he turned out to be the guy. Another dude where I talk about James Harden. James Harden thought that he was a California dude, and then he moved to Houston to realize he had actually been a Houston dude his whole life. I feel like that's Bryce Harper in Philadelphia. Like, oh, wow, right. This is what it was always supposed to be.
Well, the business of caring, once again. That that Northeast corridor stuff, that's very, very different from everywhere else. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, baseball, people are insane. And some people don't want that level of insanity. Right? I mean, I remember one year the Red Sox lost an opening day. They lost opening day. I don't remember what year it was. And the headline was, wait till next year. right? I mean, it's kind of a troll, but still, there's 161 more of these things. So, I mean, yeah, and I think that what you're gonna get, or what you have the opportunity to get, is whether you're Juan Soto, whether you're Aaron Judge, Mookie Betts already has a World Series, 2 of them. You've got a chance right now to make a statement. You got everything you're asking for, right? I was making a little joke when Fry hit the home run to give the Guardians the walk off against the Yankees. I was like, okay, I'm not going to say Rob Manfred just put his foot through the TV, but he might have, because this is what everybody wants. I mean, in terms of your markets, you've got New York, you've got LA, you've got 4 arguably. You could make an argument. You got your 4 best players in the World Series right now.
Yeah.
You got everything you want. Now's your time. Give us a show.
We're going to see. I want to switch gears just a little bit since you are a resident Boston Celtics fan. They won a championship. They won 64 games. They're statistically one of the most dominant teams ever. They could have won that game by 75 points if they played on Tuesday night. So you trust them now, or you just think they won a championship that one time?
Nah, you got to leave them alone now. I mean, you got to leave them alone. You got to leave them alone for 2 reasons. Like, the one thing that's just wild about the Celtics, and I actually had I did a Q&A with Jayson Tatum last month, and I said to him, by all rights, you guys killed everybody last year. You beat 3 teams by 50 points. You won 16 games in the postseason. You lost 3 games. Right? I mean, you destroyed everybody. You did everything that was asked of you. Everything that people said you hadn't been for these 7 years, and rightfully. So now you guys have entered a different space as far as I'm concerned. And now you add to it that you've got the world champions essentially on a revenge tour because your 2 best players are mad that they're not getting the respect. They didn't get the Olympic respect. So, and then you come out and you bang 29 threes on opening night. I mean, maybe they have moved into a new space, and you have to leave them alone, because the same way you leave champions alone. Once you're a champion, now let's see what you do with your championship. But you can't just keep holding all the old stuff like they haven't proved it, because they did prove it.
Well, I will say this. I hadn't really thought about this until this very moment, but if there's any city that will encourage your lingering resentment, they're in the right one. Like, if you want somebody to fuel your feeling of disrespect and, not getting the props that you deserve.
There's no angrier city than Boston, Massachusetts. I mean, just anger. Like, Boston is angry when it wins. And there are some moments of exhalation, but all I will point to is you have arguably the greatest dynasty in the history of professional football in terms of, what the Patriots did statistically. I'm not saying they were better than the Steel Curtain or whatever. I'm just saying, for that length of time doing what they did, they're in that upper echelon. You have the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably Tom Brady, most decorated. You have everything you wanted. You went from losers to winners. Everybody laughed at the Patriots for virtually my entire life. And now you have this run. And what is your motto? They hate us because they ain't us. Could you be a little happy about this? You know what I mean? I mean, do your job. It's the most joyless, right? The most unhappy dynasty ever. You got it all. You won. You're the Patriots. You got everything you could have. I mean, when we were kids, the games were blacked out. You couldn't even sell out. We sitting there watching the New York Giants every week because they didn't sell out home games. And so now you finally get to the top of the mountain, and instead of enjoying it, it's a big, giant middle finger to everybody. It's so Boston.
Why are you like this?
Why y'all like this? Because it's cold. It's cold.
That's always been my argument. It's cold.
And not just cold, but it's cold, and it's windy, and it's miserable. It's all of the things. There's a lot of psychology there. But I think the one thing that I do see with the Celtics that I'm hoping is true, and I'm hoping they don't go revenge tour. It was us against the world. Nobody gave us a chance to win stuff because everyone was saying they're going to win. And everyone's saying they're going to win now. But I get the impression that they have a chance to avoid some of that. Drew Holiday's a real professional. Derek White's a real professional. Although I do believe that both Brown and Tatum, they've got what we call in Boston Irish Alzheimer's. They will forget everything but the grudge.
They do seem to be those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see Jaylen Brown go on Stephen A's podcast with his "State Your Sources" shirt to talk about the idea that people said that he's not marketable and all of this? And I'm like, brother, this is not that big a deal.
And it's not that.
Right. Like Stephen A saying that is not the reason that this is happening to you.
The next t-shirt should be, "I'm making your point."
Like, bruh, this is what he's saying. This is what the streets is saying about you, right? I do think he led to a very interesting discussion of unnamed sources, though, that I think that people misunderstand. Like, I listened to Gilbert on his pod talk about it, and some other people bring it up, and their point makes sense on a surface, but I think it misses the larger macro point, right? Which is they believe that any old body can call Stephen A. Smith, and then Stephen A. Smith will relay what any old body says. And the game is not supposed to work that way. In theory, that can happen. But what you're supposed to do is have enough trust in the person that is saying it to you that you understand that this person wouldn't come at you with any old bullshit. And that, look, I can't tell you who said it because come on, you understand why I can't tell you who said it. But I'm telling you, like, this is me saying this to you. This is what the streets are saying about you. And so we as media have to deal with the fact that maybe we haven't earned the trust and that trust needs to be earned. But I would hate to think that people are so simple as to believe that, like, any dude, the mailman can come in and say that, and then all of a sudden somebody gonna run and say it on TV.
Well, it's exactly where we are with our discourse, which is why I'm sick of microphones, including using them, right? I mean, this is where we are. And what he's essentially saying is there's a lack of professional respect. I don't believe you are a professional. And there is a way to do this, but this is one of the things when you talk about the information superhighway and you talk about how social media and how the internet and everything else has essentially democratized media. It also means that everybody can say any old thing and you lose professionalism. Your professionalism becomes undermined. And so, yes, we lost a lot of that respect and we have to earn that respect. But you also, in some ways, have to, what's the best way to say this? You also have to recognize that you, as the professional, also have to believe in professionalism, right? You want us to believe that you're professional, Mr. Basketball Player. So you also have to believe that I know what I'm doing. And I think that what has happened in because the athlete has actually finally won the battle, because their money allows them to do all kinds of things that they're not equipped to do, right? They're basketball players, but they want you to believe that they're philanthropists and that they're journalists and that they're broadcasters and that they're directors and production executives. They want you to believe all of these things, which is their way of saying, I don't have any professional respect for anybody. I know that there is a way to do this job. And we have been trained to do it a certain way. There are people in this business who are unethical and who are not doing it the right way. But clearly, you can see in our discourse that we have lost all professional respect for each other.
I also think that Jaylen Brown and guys in that position are fighting, not even fighting, they're leaning in on a very human impulse in that moment, which is say it to my face. When you say state your sources, it is not because you want Stephen A. to demonstrate some legitimacy behind their words. What you are saying is bring that motherfucker out here and make him say it to my face, which is not my job, right? That's between you and whoever the person is And I am sure that Jaylen Brown's thing is, don't nobody say they don't like me to my face, because people never say that stuff to your face. That's not how the world works. They exist in a space that few of us would want to exist in, which is having access to what people think about us at all times.
Well, and
Whether
also
it
they're
is some
exactly they're
person on the internet or it's some person in your life that's saying it through these other people, but it's a chance that it's somebody who be smiling in your face all the time, and now they talking behind your back, and everybody hates that, boy.
That's true. And that's the reason why, you've had these anthropological studies about whether or not, how much information is the human brain meant to absorb. It's all in your face right now. And I think that what you end up with, especially in their world, because their world is so public and their world is so reactionary, like they're listening to everybody. And you do need to create some of those filters and bubbles and firewalls for yourself, because you're already trained to compete against everything around you. And you have to have some sort of understanding also that this is the arena that you've chosen to be in, and it's a completely unnatural arena.
It's the super fish bowl. Like, it's a whole different fish bowl than it ever been before. And I was looking at a lot of the things that you see come from WNBA players a lot, and I find that a lot of it is, wow, you guys are really online, right? Like, I thought about this with the Christine Brennan thing, where I thought there was a point, but I look at a lot of it and I'm like, oh man, a lot of this would be easier if you could just jump offline, but it's not so simple to tell people who are truly native to this space. That's how they communicate with each other.
That's how they communicate now.
That's how they all navigate through the world. But man, and I didn't say this part, and this is very important. This is also where you get your hitter right here, hit of them pats on the back, hit of that attaboy, hit of that attagirl, hit all the people telling you how dope you are. Just in the meantime, people gonna tell you how whack they are behind an account that look like it got a barcode number on it. You know what I'm saying? 973-542-132. Feel like your shit look like an account, like an actual account number. That's the trade you wind up making. But that's, no matter what it is, it's people surrounded in a world where they're surrounded by the negativity that is foisted upon them, while often being too young to truly have the tools to know how to navigate it. It's a lot, man.
No, it's absolutely a lot. And also, once again, when you don't have the sort of space to understand what's around you, it can be a total disaster. And I think that, obviously, moving cross topic, but when I go back and I think about all of the different athletes that you've had to deal with, I mean, one of the number one things that we had learned was, if you say something about somebody, you show up in the clubhouse the next day. So, to answer Jaylen Brown's point, say it to my face, I need to be right there in the clubhouse the next day. And one of the biggest things in our profession that had always been problematic was when you didn't show up the next day. Oh, you're going to be the columnist out there sniping, but you never show up in the room. So you always had to show up, just to make sure that you were putting a face to the words that you put in the paper. And today's world is complete. Everybody's, how do you know who you're talking to on any of this? But I think it's also something else, which is when you have an industry that has lost all of its boundaries. It's like watching Get Shorty. The gangsters want to be actors, and the actors want to be gangsters. You know what I mean? It's like all of these different things. When all those lines get blurred, you begin to take the different professional guidelines from one industry and you try to put them into another, and they don't always work. The structure and the mores of a professional basketball game is different than a press box. Especially because at the end of the day, in the NBA or whatever, they might just start fighting, right? I mean, yes. Like the way that you communicate through it changes depending on the industry that you're in.
I want to bring up something completely unrelated, because it happened last night, and I feel like you and I are in the same place, where I like a little violence in my sports, to be perfectly honest. I understand that it's very difficult to regulate it to just a little violence, but I like a little violence. Man, Wednesday night, I'm having dinner. I look up at the screen. It's the Nets and the Hawks. And I forget which dude for the Hawks was going to the basket, but Nick Claxton hit that dude with a for real deal clothesline, like where he hit him across the neck, his neck snapped back, the dude hit the ground. And I think Nick Claxton just wanted to fight because he kept walking toward the stands and there was nothing going on there. And the dude, he clotheslined, took a minute to gather himself, and then he hopped up. I was like, they got to fight about this. Like, I felt like there was no other way for what that play was. It was so clearly and obviously dirty. Man, he hopped up and he ran behind Nick Claxton so fast, and then he got in his face and just talked it out. And I was so confused. I couldn't understand why he was so aggressive to jump up and go talk it out. And I just want to say again, as I've said many times, we can handle a fight every now and then, can't we? Can't we?
Maybe. I mean, I think that, once again, it depends on how performative it is. And if you're fighting every night, then there's no such thing as a fight. Then it's just part of the game. The reason why fights mattered so much in basketball was because very rarely did you see a throwdown, like a real throwdown. Like, oh, Maurice Lucas just popped Daryl Dawkins, right? I mean, like a real throwdown. Rambus in the clothesline with McHale and those real, Jeff Van Gundy and the Knicks and everything getting into it. Obviously, Malice at the Palace. I mean, real throwdowns. But if everyone's just gonna it's like in baseball. You're gonna get mad every time somebody hits you with a pitch, right? There's a certain level of toughness that comes with it. Now, I will go off topic for a quick second with you, and I will tell you the thing that I've said all the time. What I want to see in terms of whether or not we actually do want a little bit of violence in our lives is I would like to see what the NHL would look like if it had the racial composition of the NBA. There would be no fighting. There would be no fighting in the NHL if the NHL were 80% black. Because when white dudes fight, they're policing each other and nobody feels threatened. Like there's a difference between violence and threat. Or threat and violence, right? You put a bunch of black dudes on the ice, or even in the NBA, where fighting is part of the game, and you give them a weapon, a stick, there would be no fighting in the NHL.
Man, it would be interesting. There would be no fighting, and presumably it would be an even speedier game than it already is. Because they're not gonna have no slow black people out there. That's not how this works, right? There's slow white people all over the world. We can go find one of those.
Well, it's the policing piece of it, Bo, that I think that we're getting to, right? And that is hockey polices itself on the ice.
Yep.
And the sport allows itself to be policed because if you don't have enforcers, if you don't allow a certain area of players settling their own issues, then the game would be completely lawless, even though it sort of looks lawless now in some point. And I love hockey. I'm a big hockey fan, right? Football polices itself a little bit differently. I think football polices itself because the game is so violent, because the game, every single play, someone's getting clapped. So they all know, okay, we need to, so you don't really, and also they have weapons in there because they're so big, or they can take their helmets off and hit each other, but your face is covered. And you're covered in pads, so it doesn't make sense to punch each other. You're punching, you're punching steel if you punch a guy in the helmet. So that all goes away. Basketball, on the other hand, basketball has had a fluid relationship with policing itself because these dudes have been going at each other since the 50s and 60s. Right? There's photos of Wilt Chamberlain and Sam Jones. Sam Jones has a stool. He's trying to protect himself against Wilt Chamberlain beating his ass, right? So the basketball policing is really different. And so it's nothing new that these guys go at each other. But I think the question in basketball has always been how much is policing and how much is y'all are just acting foul right now. You're just dirty players, right?
Right.
They're not the same thing.
I'm going to ask this question historically about policing, and maybe you have the answer. I feel like you're the right person for me to ask. How in the world was Bob Gibson allowed to be the most terrifying man in the world? Like, one would think in that era, as we talk about, you can't let black people do all these things. Bob Gibson managed to make it all the way through his life as the universally respected, scariest man on planet Earth. Even as an adult, an elderly adult, fighting people on the road.
You know what my actual answer is? Because Bob Gibson played the white man's game. the number one thing that you have to understand about baseball is that the entire notion of policing in baseball goes back to the roots of an all-white, Southern, Midwestern redneck game. That's how the sport policed itself. Negro leagues didn't police themselves that way. You go down to Dominican, they don't police themselves that way. You go to Asia, the Japanese leagues don't police themselves that way. Bob Gibson integrated himself into the way white baseball is played, and he was respected for it. But in terms of, like, there's no real history in the Negro leagues. Like, Satchel Paige was considered one of the great players. Bullet Joe Rogan, one of the great pitchers, right? Slim Jones, one of the great pitchers. None of those guys had a fearsome reputation of hitting you with the baseball. That's the white guy's game. That's the Drysdale, Gibson, Mean, Bob Feller. That's how that sport is played. And because Gibson played it the way they felt baseball needed to be played, he's celebrated for it.
You have answered the question, because I could never figure that out, boy. I was surprised they ain't going to spin
went
him
with
pronto.
him after he retired. Fearsome Bob Gibson. Oh, man, Juan Soto going to stare down face Bob Gibson doing that, right? I mean, and it's also the optics, too, because Gibson was all business, and there's a thing about, there's that machismo about baseball. And that's what's so funny. When I covered football, the first thing that hit me about football was these guys deal with more violence and more pain and are actually much more humble about it than baseball players. They actually understand the violence.
Yeah.
On every single play, they get it. So they don't have their chest necessarily pumped out. And what's really sort of funny is the guys who do have their chest pumped out the most are the ones who are furthest away from the ball on snap, which is wide receivers. So the diva trash talk thing is the one-on-one between the wide receiver and the cornerback. But everybody else is just used to getting pounded. They don't have time for that machismo stuff.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, the wide receiver is talking smack to the person who's not going to be the one to knock his block when it comes down, right? That's just by the way the game is played. It's not going to be that person. I don't know if it's good or bad for you children who are growing up, unlike we did. None of you are growing up in a generation where there's players who only exist to maim. That's the only reason I'm here, is to maim.
Well, and with the money being what it is now, policing is, there are very few baseball pitchers who are going out there the way Pedro Martinez was like, yeah, I'm going to hit Derek Jeter with the ball, right? You got a dude making 28 million, 30, 40, 50 million. The owner's meeting is like, we can't have this. We can't have this. I got 700 million invested in this guy. You can't be hitting him on the hand.
It's not happening.
That ain't happening. When these guys are disposable, okay. But I got too much money invested in these dudes now.
That is Howard Bryant, Meadowlark Media, ESPN. Check out The Comeback about the 2004 Red Sox. You can find that on Netflix. I checked out the first episode. It is very good. I encourage you guys, check that out. My man, I greatly appreciate you.
As always, Bo, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Sean, we got prize picks for the people.
Sure do. World Series starts today on Friday. Let's go Shohei Ohtani, 1.5 total bases. I'll take more there. Mookie Betts, 1.5 total bases. I'll take more there. Kike Hernandez, who's been on a nice tear since being added to the starting lineup. 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs there. And Garrett Cole, 5 strikeouts. I'll take more there as well for the World Series matchup.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on The Right Time. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel. The Right Time YouTube channel has lots of exclusive YouTube-only content. Be sure to check that out. Hit the voicemail line, 323-596-7767. Tell us the most inappropriate thing you have seen at a youth sports competition, whether it were perpetrated by the children or the children that are actually adults. You could pick which. 323-596-7767. Sean Yu handles everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. Remember, follow The Right Time. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. Take it easy.